Hello everybody and welcome to the Aviation Show, brought to you as always by the fabulous Pima Air and Space Museum in Tucson, Arizona, where we are not, because we're here in Virginia Triangle at the National Museum of the Marine Corps with the aviation curator, Dr. Larry Burke. Thank you so much for taking the time to show us around your museum.
Sure, always happy to show it off.
Fantastic. We say yours. Jon Bernstein, fabulous John, over in the corner there as well. He does arms and armor, so we're not going to talk to him. He'll be on. We'll get on about P-47s and so on. But Larry, thanks for taking the time.
Sure.
Question we always start with museum professionals is, how did you get into the game, really? And how did you end up here?
It was a long road. Always kind of interested in history. And actually, as an undergraduate, I thought I wanted to be an aeronautical engineer. And, about 2 years in, was disabused of that, and sort of fell into history as well. You know, this is something that I can finish in 2 years and graduate on time. But it was something that I sort of picked up at that point. I began volunteering in museums, and when the time came, was married at the time, and my wife was in the military, so I thought, we'll be moving around. And I thought a museum studies degree would be a fairly portable thing.
Yeah.
So I got a museum studies degree looking at history. And then sort of fell into life circumstances. Had looked into getting a PhD in history before, and sort of, said, no, I'm not sure, now is the time. And then things changed, and it was like, all right, well, I can do this. It's a good time, it's a good thing. And I was always kind of interested coming out of the museum studies degree. They told us, if you want to be a curator, this is not the degree for you. You should get a degree in whatever you want to curate. Okay. I went through thinking, okay, well, if I go through this program and I'm a registrar, and I know a lot of small to medium-sized museums really don't need a full-time registrar, but if I can be a registrar curator, that would be fantastic. So again, when the time came, looked at the PhD, and it was a good time to do it. And I kind of fell into aviation as a topic. I was interested in history of technology and military technology specifically, and was initially looking at the period in the U.S. Navy, the switch from sail to steam, and everything that goes along with that. And I was researching this really niche thing because I thought this professor that was teaching the course would be able to give me a hand with this. Turns out he couldn't, and the niche thing was a little too niche. And my advisor said, both the instructor and my advisor said, there's not enough here for a PhD, you need to come up with a different topic. And I kind of fell into this early aviation when a senior scholar said, no one's written a really good multi-service history of U.S. military aviation. And I kind of went, okay, and walked away and started looking into it and said, well, what does that mean? What would it mean? And I found myself really drawn to the origins of aviation. That, even if you believe the idea that aviation didn't matter in the First World War, there are the questions of, okay, what if it didn't matter, what did they think they were doing at the time? Why didn't it matter? Were they doing something wrong? And who were the people that were coming up with the ideas? Where were they pushing it? What were their thoughts? And so my PhD became that very early period from the Wright brothers until just after the First World War, and looking at the U.S. Army, Navy, and Marine Corps, because there was no Air Force yet. And from that, had a postdoc teaching history at the Naval Academy, and then this job at the Air and Space Museum came up doing naval aviation history, and did that and was doing that for a while. That job came to an end, and just about the time that this job opened up, and the senior curator at the time, I had already been working with exchanging, borrowing stuff
Yeah.
from National Museum of Marine Corps. So he knew me, I knew him, and when I said, hey, I'm going to be job hunting soon, let me know if you hear anything, he said, actually, we've got a spot. So I ended up here.
And this is a fantastic museum and incredible space that you walk into. There's big and imposing outside. We'll put some B-roll in on that. But as curator, when you are hanging the aircraft here in the Atrium and you're giving people that sort of first taste of Marine Corps aviation, what goes into that? Because we've got 2 Corsairs, we've got SBD, we've got an Aviate-B, FB1 around the corner. I can only see a tail.
No, that is.
Oh, the FB1's in restoration.
Yeah. That's a Jenny JN6, although it might actually be a 4. It's supposed to be a 6. And then our HUS or UH-37. Post 1962, which is the other complex thing that the designation.
I'm specifically skipping the helicopters just to wind John. But it's because I suppose this is one of those sort of silly questions that are thrown, really, because the Corps is the Corps, and people think of the fighting man on the beach in the Pacific as that first sort of thing into Vietnam, boots on the ground sort of thing. But Marine Corps aviation goes right the way back to aviation in the military of its own. It's its own sort of parallel development through it.
Right.
So when you're selecting these aircraft here, and even Ellie they've got Corsair, which we have to mention the H4 rockets on it because 2 of us here are quite interested in aircraft rockets. What's the thought process for this? Because this is no small undertaking to get this just right.
It's not. This was certainly a lot of work, and of course this was all before my time. But the sort of idea behind this was that these would be this atrium as a whole would represent sort of significant technological changes in the Marine Corps. And so we also have the track landing vehicle on display as well. So the idea is that these are all aircraft that have fundamentally changed how the Corps works. And it is, certainly you walk in here and you could be forgiven for thinking this is a Marine Corps Aviation Museum. It's not. And we get complaints from the ground museum, the ground Marines that it's too much aviation here. Aviation is only like 10% of the modern Corps, and I get that. The problem is that, especially when you got a big vertical space like this, what else are you going to put up there?
Yeah.
This certainly is a natural place for aircraft.
It would be interesting to hang a tank from the
yes.
side. But
yes.
A couple Corsairs, SBD, Aviate-B is heavy enough, let alone one of John's toys.
Yes, and as we were talking before we started filming, we're actually getting ready to hang a Super Cobra, more or less directly in front of where we are now. My understanding is that this space was left open because originally they were going to hang an F4 Phantom here. And even with the engines removed, that was just too heavy.
Yeah.
So weight is a very practical consideration. Certainly space is a consideration. We were looking at putting this helicopter in. Do we have the space? Do we have clearance from the top, from the other aircraft, from the sides? And again, things like we are hanging it from the roof. So even though vertically there's a lot of space between us and that upper Corsair, we have to worry about where those cables are.
Yeah.
Are the cables getting too close to that Corsair? Because we've got to leave some room for swing due to air currents, due to cleaning. Should we have another earthquake in the area?
Yeah.
So these are all considerations as to what can go in. But also there is that what is that story that we're telling when you first walk in?
And what is that story?
Well, as I say, it's about innovation. The Marines as a very innovative service, and something that I certainly got in my PhD looking at Marines, Navy, and Army. Marines are inherently a very flexible organization. They'll take what they're given, and they might not do what you expect with it, because they're thinking out of the box. But it's the what can we do with this?
The Harry being the great example of that in modern times. I suppose.
Although again, much more in my PhD period is unfortunately the airplane you can't see from here, which is that Jenny, which gets sent down to Haiti and the Dominican Republic after the First World War. So the Marines are actually in Haiti and the DR. Well, Haiti throughout the war, DR a little bit later. But Alfred Cunningham, who's considered the father of the Marine Corps, when they get back from the First World War, Cunningham says, I need to get my aviators out there supporting the Marines, and he writes in 1920 that the only reason for aviation is to support the man on the ground.
Yeah.
And he wants to demonstrate this, so he sends these armed training craft, basically, because that's what he's got.
Let's walk around and get into the shot, because our fabulous camera lady is now back in the land of the living, so we might as well make her move around a bit. There we go.
So, as I say, Cunningham is interested in making sure that he's supporting the ground Marines, which, again, just because of operational considerations, he wasn't able to do in the First World War. And so he's sending aircraft down to Haiti and the Dominican Republic and basically telling his squadron leaders, make yourselves useful. And they go down there and they talk to the guys on the ground and say, what can we do for you? And they're doing all sorts of things. They are, flying in supplies, they're flying out, evacuation, medical evacuations. They are providing reconnaissance, intelligence, strafing. They're actually doing the beginnings of close air support, which they got to do a little bit during the First World War, but this is where they really sort of get to experiment with it. And so, everything, the six sort of foundations of modern Marine aviation support go back to the stuff that these guys were doing down in the Caribbean in 1919, 1920.
That's brilliant. I do like it.
And we see that again with our helicopter down here, and bringing in this idea of vertical envelopment, that you're not just taking troops from point A to point B. It's not just simply transport. You're actually using them as delivering them directly to the front line. So it is an extension of our World War II beach assault. The helicopter just says, oh, you get to fly over the beach and land further back. So hopefully the idea that people come in here and they see all this and they think about all of the things that the Marine Corps has developed.
It's a fabulous space, and just certainly centers you as you walk into just how much story there is to tell when we get into the galleries. So we don't have you for a lot of time. So do you want to show us one of the galleries that you have here for aviation?
Sure.
Because it's not just these aircraft on display, is it?
It's not. We do have, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 here, soon to be 7. And we've got something on the order of 24, I think, in the building. Admittedly including UAVs.
Yeah.
But
Let's walk and talk like the West Wing. Yeah.
you can edit this out later.
It's always the way you stop it as you're walking and talking, and then you talk about something really interesting, and you're like, oh, let's do it again, and you never really has the spontaneity of what I did before. Okay, that's quite impressive.
Right, so we come back here, we're looking, literally looking over our newest galleries, 13 and 14. Gallery 13 sort of bridges the end of the Vietnam War into roughly Desert Storm, Desert Shield, but also covers operations other than war. So it's every climb and place. And we do have that sort of initial entry. We are looking at things like the Grenada invasion, the bombings in Lebanon, and of course eventually Desert Shield, Desert Storm. But then around here you see this blue area. That's really looking at the Marines being everywhere around the world, and the humanitarian missions, just interacting with locals, problems of basing on Okinawa, for instance, and the friction that came out of that. And then Gallery 14 here is really dedicated to Operations Iraqi Freedom and Enduring Freedom. And as you mentioned, we got our F-18 here in a tight bank, so it sort of forms a wall.
Tight bank and a tight fit.
It is a very tight fit. They really had to do a lot of careful consideration, and my understanding is that there was about 6 inches of play in the mount. So that, because, they had to
wiggle room.
Yeah. They had to put the mount in massive concrete support. And, you're not going to get millimetric precision with that. So,
So it's interesting as well, as you walk through the gallery there, you've also got the sort of development of the UAVs as you start moving up into sort of the smaller modern stuff to the bigger elements, which that name is on the tip of my tongue.
Yeah, the Pioneer.
Yeah, it's that sort of dual element, is it? You've got the old school air support in the shape of the F-18, but then also the ability of the Marine on the ground to use lightweight portable drones to give them the information they might not be able to get otherwise.
And again, you see that sort of I want to call it the vertical range, but organizationally vertical range from things like the Scan Eagle and the Pioneer that are held at the higher levels, down to stuff that might be company platoon level over here in our cityscape, where admittedly they get a little bit lost, but obviously we've got to make some sort of compromise in order to actually show them. But we get our smaller UAVs over here that are, again, put out at that lower level, and we're helping the guys, going through the city to give them that more instant reconnaissance ability to see what's 2 blocks over, what's on the other side of that bridge, that sort of thing. So
this is really impressive, and what a fantastic use of space to get as much in as you do, because we've got a nice bird's eye view up here, but goodness, there's a lot of things to draw the eye.
There are, and there are some things you can really only see from up here. So we've got our sort of sniper nest here, and we've got a few other tidbits. If you look over here, just over the railing, you can see the sort of rooftop tea and chess setup, backgammon, where the locals might just be out in the morning. And it's stuff like this that you really won't see from downstairs. And again, with our city campaign immersive, we are trying to give that feeling of really being hemmed in. You can see when you get down there.
Right.
Shall we go down?
Yeah.
To establish forward operating base Rhino. to begin ground combat operations. In December,
So skip through this, but definitely encourage you to come back and sort of experience that introduction as the in the field briefing, if you will.
That's that's an angle you don't get to see very often.
And this is one of the nice things about putting it up on that knife edge, is that this is one of the few aircraft that you can actually see the top of in the galleries. The frustration is, on the one hand, you've got vertical space, so why not put an airplane in there? Where else is it going to go? And even small airplanes are very, very big. They take up a lot of floor space. So hanging them is a good answer. But for as tight a space as we've got in here, it means that a lot of time you're just looking at the bottom of the airplane, and not much else. So. And we do have here, this is the windscreen from a Harrier that was in Afghanistan when some Afghan insurgents were actually able to get on, infiltrate the airbase, and they actually destroyed all of the Harriers that were there at the time. But the CO of the squadron, Lieutenant Colonel Rabel, was leading his Marines as ground Marines, trying to push the insurgents back. He unfortunately lost his life, as did one of the maintenance sergeants. But this is one of the windscreens from the Harriers that were destroyed, and you can see the bullet holes from that combat.
Wow.
Give you a chance to look at this side. Again, here you can see the top of the airplane. But we've also put out all of this ordnance and other equipment to really give a sense of the variety of things that go into Marine Corps aviation. So we've got the bombs, we've got cluster bombs, we've got napalm, we've got guided bombs, we've got the missiles. And then one of my favorites is this long gray thing here in the middle. This is off of a EA-6B Prowler, and this is one of the jammer transmitters that the airplane would carry. Typically 3 of these, and each of these has 3 separate transmitters inside that can be tuned and directed individually. And this bulged bottom, there are actually 3 dish antennas, steerable dish antennas under there. And so you see all the notices about do not rest the pod on the bottom. But this is all, it's connected to the system in the airplane, but it's powered by this ram air turbine in the front, and basically gets all of its power from that. And again, this is one of the sort of unsung heroes that the Marines were really pushing, the idea of tactical electronic warfare, EW aircraft that can go in with the raid instead of doing standoff jamming, and are more capable than any onboard systems, because you got somebody that can be dedicated to what are we being pinged with, what's the best way to counter that. But it goes beyond simple radar. They were also involved with communications, so they could do basic communications intelligence, just where are the signals coming from. To, in some cases, they would actually have people that understood the language of whoever they were flying against. They could listen in on transmissions and gain intelligence that way, and they could also jam the transmissions.
And that's the benefit of modifying an attack platform into an electronic warfare one. Where you've got with the Growler now with the EA-18 and the venerable A6 Intruder that seem to live on forever is the.
And again, the benefits of having somebody in the craft that can concentrate on that electronic warfare, as opposed to sort of leaving it to the AI. Yeah. That sort of thing. But again, that going in with the strike team, and what can that do? So. So going in here, this is our FARP scene, the forward air refueling point. This is something that the Marines have been developing. How can we get aviation as forward as possible? Have to wait for our simulation to run here. How can we put aviation as close as possible to the front lines? And the FARP literally does what it says on the label, forward air refueling point. We're going to send a couple of maintenance guys with some extra ammunition, some extra fuel, as far forward as we can push them. So, you're going to fly out of the base where you get your repair facilities, and you go out to these FARPs, which are really pretty sparse. But you're going to fly out of your base. You might have an hour on station, maybe less, depending on how far back you are and how far forward the lines are. Instead of having to fly all the way back, you can just fly to a FARP.
Yeah.
And in fact, they talk about during OIF that they were called on for so much ground support that they were running out of their ammunition before they ran out of gas. So they're landing at the FARP and really just rearming, not refueling. And again, lets the Marines turn around these attack helicopters very quickly.
And keep them at the pointy end where they're needed.
Mm-hmm.
So, just checking the time,
Yep.
We are almost up. I am going to ask the important when to mannequin and not to mannequin, because the mannequins here are top grade, but in some places, not so much.
That's actually this is the perfect point to bring that up, because these are cast figure mannequins that are cast from actual human beings.
Ah,
This one right here is our outreach curator, Cater Miller, who was an aviation ordnance man in OIF. He was there as basically doing this job, and that was cast directly from him.
so we're going high grade mannequins
Oh,
here,
yes.
aren't we?
It depends. Something like this where you're up close and personal. We're getting cast figures. Here in this gallery, we do actually have the option, the opportunity in at least some cases, to get casts of people who were there. So, for instance, our armored vehicle back there,
Yes.
and I'm blanking on the.
Captain. I'm just blanked on his name too. I'd have to go back.
Yeah.
And look at it.
You guys can tell
Anyway,
me later, and we'll put it up
Tell
on the
you
bottom
later.
of the screen. Yeah.
So for something up close and personal like this, we are getting actual Marines. So we're bringing them over from the base to stand in for these people. And that's true going back to our World War I, our Civil War. All of the cast figures are Marines.
That's brilliant.
So, as far as the aircraft, again, it depends on how much you'll be able to see of them. Basically, if you can see into the cockpit reasonably well, we will try to put something in there. So, our AH-1s, air crew, actually, they will be a bit of an exception. They're not cast, they are generic heads that we're getting from the figure company. And the figures themselves are very simple because, of course, they're going to be covered in flight suits. So you're not going to see the bodies. But we do want to give that impression of what do these aircraft look like when they are in use. And so the decision was made to put the figures in there.
Simulated Cobra's going over the top. So it's that, I suppose it's that tricky point of getting the aesthetic right and then making sure you don't have too much sort of voided space as well, which would detract from what you're trying to accomplish with the display.
Right.
Yeah. Fantastic. Right. Well, Larry, thank you.
You're welcome.
Putting his microphone back on. I'm actually going to steal you because we're going to talk about your display outside.
Cool.
Even though it's a Target. It's not really something fantastic. But thank you so much for showing us around. And dear viewer, listener, if you're listening in on this, we've done one gallery. This place is massive. So do come out this way to Virginia Triangle and check out the National Museum of the Marine Corps. Thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome.
There you go. Do the handshake because then it looks official on the. As I've got my buddy John with me,
We're going to talk about whirly things.
we're going to talk about whirly death machines.
Cool.
And we're going to talk about a Medal of Honor winning, well, the pilot
Yep.
Medal of Honor winning, but hanging up here is a Huey and a special one. So what can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I'm sorry. This kind of sad Larry had to leave, but this is the UH-1E that was flown by Stephen Pless, who earned the Medal of Honor in this helicopter. It was basically a situation where he got a call over the radio that an Army recon team had been pinned down on a beach. They were surrounded and they were being overrun. And so he was Captain Pless at the time, basically came to their rescue and fought off about 50 North Vietnamese regulars with his UH-1E gunship. It's a short cabin Huey. It was designed as a utility aircraft, but they were pressed into service as gunships. And he's carrying two 7-shot rocket pods and what we call the TK-1 weapons system on it. And basically, they're weapons mounts that bolt to the sides, the underside of the helicopter, and each mounts two M60 machine guns that are in fixed forward positions. And then, of course, you've got two door gunners as well. So a lot of firepower for a relatively small helicopter. He was able to not only fight off this basically a company of NVA regulars, he also was able to rescue the recon team and get them out. And so for his actions there, he was awarded the Medal of Honor.
So while we're here, as we're both sort of people who've spent far too much time looking at World War II, should we have a quick look at the World War II
I think we should.
gallery? And then we'll pop outside and look at a non-aviation thing, because I know you're rather proud of it.
Yeah, there's a couple of cool things around here that are fun to talk about that are not airplanes. But actually, if you look up right now, you've got an Avenger wing right over our head, and then the Japanese Oka suicide plane, which were...
Those things are wild.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. Flying a torpedo. All right. So our World War II gallery is our largest gallery, and it starts sort of with the background of where the world is in 1940, goes to Pearl Harbor, and then immediately to Wake Island, which is the first major action fought by the Marine Corps in World War II.
4 years of bloody fighting in World War I.
The defenders of Wake Island were storied. They put up this spirited defense for almost a month, but eventually were overrun by the Japanese. We have a couple of amazing artifacts from Wake, including the prop and spinner from Major Henry Elrod's F-4F Wildcat.
Oh, wow.
That was the last Wildcat that was flying on Wake Island before it was overrun.
So as we head round, we have a Wildcat,
Yes.
again, perched very low over the gallery itself.
Yeah. It is an F4F3. No, sorry, F4F4, I believe. Yeah, it's a -4. I don't know if it has any combat history on it. A few of the airplanes in the collection a number of the airplanes in the collection do have combat experience or combat histories. We're looking more and more now into the vehicle combat histories too, and we've uncovered a few really great stories recently. We actually know that the Stuart here was a combat veteran, but I believe it's actually a British combat veteran.
Oh, wow,
We
okay.
believe it was actually in North Africa.
Okay.
I haven't been able to nail it down yet, but there are certain things about it that make me think that. So we're working on that.
Yeah, because you've got all the fun coming with the, I guess the crocodile, we would call it.
Ah, yes.
The Sherman out at Pima.
Yep.
And you're digging more of those up. But I guess, as we come under the Wildcat, it's, we're straight into Pappy Boynton,
Yep.
Black Sheep,
Sure, getting there.
Guadalcanal
Yep.
sort of time, aren't we? Because it all starts with the F4s.
It does.
You could almost say we're stranded out there for the longest time. And
Sure. Yeah, not getting much relief.
Yeah.
So it isn't until late 42, early 43 that the Corsairs start coming in.
Yeah. And then the numbers start going quite wild.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Actually, really neat piece over here. It's an M1 rifle that was recovered from Macon Island. This is one of the things that I recently got on exhibit, which I'm pretty proud of. But this is one of the first M1 rifles that was used in combat by the Marine Corps. And this was at the Macon Island raid of 17-18 August 1942. And it was unfortunately lost there with, there were 19 Marines who were killed on the island, actually 30 total, but 19 Marines who were killed on the island and left there. So this was recovered with one of the body recovery missions in 1999-2000. We don't know exactly whose it was, but we've been able to narrow it down to one of 9 Marines. Interesting thing is they were still around in the chamber. There was still one around in the magazine well.
Wow.
So yeah, I mean, he went down fighting. This went through a 5-year conservation process with the Navy Underwater Archaeology Lab to get all of the encrusted coral, sand, and everything off of it, and it's been on display here for about 18 months now. So.
That is extraordinary.
So the cool thing is the cleaning kit was still in the buttstock, and it's in almost pristine condition. The brush and the pull-through were both inside it, and so they were perfect. The combo tool, there's 2 slots in the back of the buttstock, so the cleaning kit was in the lower one, the combo tool was in the upper one, and you can see it's really sort of corroded. And that's the bullet that was still in the magazine well.
That's right. And that goes straight to the conserve versus restore conversation we had with Malcolm at Air and Space, that you wouldn't want to restore that despite its story, because in that condition it's telling quite a
heck of a story. Sure. I always tend to lean more conserve than restore. And in fact, we've been talking about the Sherman tank, where we're going to externally restore it, but internally we're going to clean it up and preserve it as it currently is, because doing a full-up restoration sort of takes away, I mean, you're going to be replacing so much, it takes away the history. So we're just going to clean it up and leave it the way it is and put it on exhibit that way once it's done.
Oh, brilliant.
So,
it's fab.
Yeah, it's...
For those of us that have got to go out to play with it. Yes, and if you are thinking of going out to the Pima Air and Space Museum, you can't see that, sorry. You can probably see it across the way, but yeah. The Pima Air and Space Museum in Tucson, Arizona is home to one of the largest non-government funded aviation and space museums in the world. Featuring nearly 400 aircraft, the museum is home to an incredible collection, like NASA's NB-52 X-15 dropship and 747 SP Sophia Airborne Observatory, to a wealth of rare military types from air forces all around the world, to the first production 777. Whether you're a military or civilian aviation geek, there will be an incredible aircraft around every corner of this epic 80-acre site for you to explore. As the Aviation Show's partnership with the Pima Air and Space Museum enters its 3rd year, we're delighted to say that Pima is truly a top of your bucket list museum to visit. And it keeps getting better, as this year the Tucson Military Vehicle Museum will be opening right next door. To find out more about the incredible collection and the fantastic events coming up at the Pima Air and Space Museum, and of course the Tucson Military Vehicle Museum, head over to www.pimaair.org to plan your trip to one of the world's great aviation collections, and one that now includes tanks next door. if that's your sort of thing. And of course, panel for isolating Raboul, which
Yep.
is fascinating
Yes.
tale of itself with
Sure.
the
Yeah,
just-
don't bother with it. Just cut them
just
off.
cut them off and shoot down everything that's trying to fly into it.
Yep.
Yeah. And Pappy, of course. There is a book coming out now,
Really?
not about Pappy,
Okay.
but the TV series,
Okay.
The Black Sheep.
Sure.
The author, whose name's gone straight out of my head, he's tracked down all the Corsairs.
Oh wow. Okay.
And sort of, he's got all the history, so everything that was in the show.
Okay.
I'll put the
Oh, I'd
name
love
of
to
it
see
up
that.
in there, and I'll send it to you as well. But
Very cool.
It's we're going to try to get him on to talk about it. And yes, there it is, Avenger poking out from the top.
Yeah, and, the Marines used Avengers differently from the Navy. They were much more close air support aircraft.
Okay.
Basically just big fighter bombers. But rocket armed and dive bombing and everything. So in fact, the first rockets fired in the Pacific Theater were fired by Avengers, by
Really?
Marine Avengers. The first American rockets fired were fired by a Navy Avenger unit against, I forget which U-boat, but against a U-boat in the North Atlantic. And then about 2 weeks later, there was a Marine, it was VMTB 134, I believe. They were the first rocket-equipped Avenger unit, and so this was January 44. They were firing 5-inch rockets.
Yeah. Your 5-inch H-fire is literally an artillery shell on the end of a rocket.
Yeah, actually, and the first ones, the FFARs were 5-inch shells bolted to a 3.5-inch rocket motor. So they were really nose heavy. They tended to nose down really quickly.
Yeah.
They were terrible. But the HFAR really, when they went to the 5-inch motor, was much better.
The 60 SAP, we're geeking out about rockets now. Slightly lighter than that 5-inch shell, but still had that terrible ballistic drop on it.
Sure. So this is one of my favorite things in the museum, and so this is representing an M4A2 from the 1st Tank Battalion on Peleliu. This is, I come here and commune with the Sherman every once in a while.
So here's, I know we're very much off aviation track, but this is something I know we've spoken about briefly when it comes to swords and the simmering debate about returning them to the families and things like that. From our discussions, I'm guessing it can be quite difficult to trace who they are, because not only do you have ones that are very old, you also have the mass-produced ones that were made during the Second World War.
Right, and this is a mass-produced officer's sword. We do have some very old swords. I mean, we have one short sword that dates to about the 1360s. The problem is there really is no way to identify who they came from unless but if they're not in the if they're just in the blade holder, usually there might be a family signature on it or something like that. But if they're actually in full mountings, it's really difficult to identify. We have about 100 swords in the collection. The majority are the mass-produced type, whether they're officers or NCO swords. But we do have a number of family swords. Well, I shouldn't say family swords, but historic swords as well. And repatriation is something that is certainly it can be touchy at times. Certainly, there are. I'm aware of instances where they were not wanted, but at the same time, it's certainly something we're aware of.
Oh yeah,
So.
it's.
And here we go. We have probably the two most important artifacts in the museum.
So that is the flag.
This is the first flag, that is the second flag.
Wow.
So this is the flag raising over Iwo Jima. And it's 80 years ago, 3 weeks from now.
Oh,
Just
yes,
under
it
3
is,
weeks from
yeah.
now. Yep. So this is the one they first raised, and they said, oh, you know, it's not big enough, you can't really see it, and so
raised
they went
that
down
one.
and got that.
So these two flags, of course, tell the story of all of the fun and games that comes afterwards in identifying who raised
Sure.
that flag, the statue, the photo.
Actually, our director was in on all of the research, and because the history division or MCU Press produced a book on the flag raisers just a few years ago, and really went into the nitnoid details and figured out exactly who was there. And so you know, our director had a hand in producing that book, and it's phenomenal. So
Incredible bit of work, yeah. But it seems counterintuitive, doesn't it, that the first one's in such good condition, and then it's the second one, which clearly was there for much longer, is the one that has the hole. I'm going to go over and have a proper look. That's really quite something.
Yep. The cool thing is our tank, the one at Pima, supported this. I mean, they were C Company 5th Tank Battalion was supporting the push on Suribachi, and they were sort of leading the way as the 28th Marines got to the base of the hill. And then, of course, the infantry went up the hill, but the tanks were all right there at the base, hitting targets, you know, hitting caves and everything as the 28th Marines were advancing. So our tank was there, which is really kind of cool.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
There we go. I know this is not great video with me standing back to squeeze in a picture with an Avenger on the background, but there we go. Cool. So it's aviation related because I've got a plane in the picture.
This was like a walkthrough.
Well, and while we're here, I did not know these were here.
Yeah, you came at the right time, because usually this only comes out for February.
Of course, yeah.
So, yeah.
I'm not going to get into my Vimy Red Ensign rant about how it sits in a drawer. Sorry, sits in a drawer at the Imperial War Museum in London and not in the War Museum in Ottawa. But the whole museum is incredibly well done, and it's you can be quite smug. I can definitely.
You know, it's fun. I mean, I've been here almost 5 years now. I got here, I think, 4 months ahead of Larry, but I've been able to do little things like the make and raid rifle, and so I've been able to start to do stuff like that. But we're looking at now redoing galleries and telling better stories. So that's really sort of where our emphasis has been now. I mean, when the museum opened, it was a lot of the artifacts were just examples of a type, whereas now that we have solidly provenanced items now that we can put on an exhibit and say, okay, it's not just a type, this is the one that was there. So it's really been very cool. Actually, right there, the Sherman, this is the exact variant that we have. This is post-summer, so it's November of 45. In the summer of 45, they converted 72 Shermans to this particular flamethrower standard. Our tank was one of them. Most of those tanks came from the 4th and 5th Tank Battalions that were on Iwo Jima.
Oh, wow.
So.
Okay, so the flamethrower modification on it wasn't at Iwo, but the tank itself was.
Right.
Okay.
It was a standard gun tank at the time. There were 8 main armament flamethrower tanks on Iwo Jima, which was the H1 variant. Yeah. The one that we have is an H5, which moved the flamethrower to the coaxial position rather than main gun. So,
cool. Well, let's wander back out into the atrium and see your exhibit that you were so happy about.
Okay.
You're quite rightly to be. It's very nice. Yeah. I do like how every time we turn a corner, there is another aircraft.
Yes. Yeah.
Another Jenny.
We actually have, we've got this one. Then we've got There's a Thomas Morse in World War I. There's actually a flying boat in
The H4, of course. Well, it is a jetty.
Yeah.
Same difference. Don't at me in the comments for that one.
So in the sort of expeditionary force, we've got a flying boat, a really early flying boat in there. So a lot of really cool airplanes. You can see the Thomas Morse up in there now.
Yeah. Because when we come out here to see your latest addition to the Atrium.
Well, no, this has been here since the beginning.
Okay.
So basically, I've got a rotating exhibit right here, which we've been rotating through artillery pieces and stuff like that. So this gun actually has an interesting history. It was captured on Guadalcanal. This is one of the guns that shelled Henderson Field.
Okay.
And it was brought back to the U.S. and then a Hollywood film director actually picked it up, and it was why can't I think of his name? But anyway, it was on his property, and then Danny Kaye, the actor, bought his residence, and it was Danny Kaye's gun for a while, and then he donated it to I believe donated to the Los Angeles Historical Society, I believe, and then they donated it to us. So we have a solid chain of custody on it from Guadalcanal to here. It's cool. I mean, you can see all the battle damage on it and everything. And I made the decision to leave it as is because it still has a fair amount of original paint on it. The battle damage certainly tells a story. The wheels are really pretty badly corroded, but it is what it is. And when it came back to the States, it wasn't all that far off from this. So, helps us tell a good story, but it's not going to get repaired, but it's not going to deteriorate any further either. So that's kind of neat.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. So then over here, we have the landings on Tarawa in November of 1943. What we're depicting is the first operational use of the LVT-1 as an assault vehicle. Landing vehicles were initially really just purposed as logistics vehicles. So, they could carry Marines in them and everything, but there's no rear ramp. There was no armor on it or anything. It was just sort of to get stuff from ship to shore. For Tarawa, because of the coral reefs around the island, Colonel David Shoup, who's commander of the 8th Marines at the time, realized that they needed something that was going to be able to get across the reefs. Otherwise, they were going to get stopped at the reefs in Higgins boats and get shot to pieces. Yeah. And so the LVT-1s, and there were some LVT-2s by that time as well, they grabbed as many as they could, and from the 2nd Amphibian Tractor Battalion, outfitted a bunch of them with bolt-on armor, at least on the front, and piled a bunch of Marines in the back. And you can see here they had to go over the sides when they got to the beach. So, I mean, they were really under fire and everything, but the concept worked. It got them to the beach, and it got them to where they could fight effectively. And from November of 43 through the summer of 44, there's a major evolution in landing vehicle development, and going from the LVT-1 all the way up to the LVT-4. And the 4s were the first ones that actually had a troop ramp at the rear. Mm-hmm. The LVT-3 was sort of a parallel development, but they really didn't get into service until 1945. Yeah. So the 4s were really the workhorse from the summer of 44 onwards. And that was a significantly better development because they dropped the ramp, it's easier for the guys to get out, a lot safer and everything, and so much more effective.
Having seen the pictures and going, this is an impressive place, and now that we've just had a very brief look around, it really is an impressive museum. So thank you, Jon. Thank you, Larry, who's back doing important day job stuff. Yep. But thank you, mate. This has been good. And it's been lovely to see you in the real
seriously.
For the first time. Yeah.
We've been talking for years. It's the first time we've actually gotten together. This is awesome.
So do check out Jon's books on the P-47. They're all right.
Not as cool as the Typhoon.
Yeah, well, it's our usual debate. But you've got you're working on P-47N in the Pacific at the
Yes,
moment, aren't you?
P-47N units of the Central Pacific for Osprey's combat aircraft series, and actually finding some really cool stuff. So yeah, that should be out in fall of 27, I believe.
Okay, so you've got a little bit more time than I do.
I do.
Typhoon flight, yeah. Okay. Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Anytime.
Everybody, check out the links in the description below for the National Museum of the Marine Corps. And if you're out this way, as we've been doing this swing through Washington and Virginia, do pop in, because this really is an impressive place. So until next time, thanks everybody. I'd like to say thanks to all of our fantastic supporters over on Patreon. If you head over to our Patreon page, you can join the fun from just £3 a month, plus a bit of VAT, get your name in these very credits, and get all the episodes ad-free and early as soon as I get the edit finished. The Aviation Show is hosted and produced by Matt Bowe and is a Boney Abroad production.